The village of Dahan Abasid lies on the slopes 3,000 metres above sea level in the middle of Afghanistan, in the province of Bamiyan. The people in this area are Hazaras, the third largest ethnic group in the country. It's springtime and the villagers are preparing to celebrate Eid, but this year, like the previous year, the Muslim festival is going to be meagre. Usually, each family would slaughter one sheep for the festival. But now, 9 families have had to come together to be able to slaughter just one. That's what it's like in our village nowadays. The people in Dahan Abasid are barely surviving the drought, now in its 3rd year. Even though more snow fell this winter, it's nowhere near what's needed. Usually, it's this much. Close to half the inhabitants have left the village, not just because of the drought. The Taliban, who have military control, pursue a repressive policy towards the Hazaras, and those who still live here live in fear. Recently, fighting between the Taliban and the Hazara party, which has joined the opposition alliance, took place here. The villagers fear another outbreak. The Hazaras are Shia Muslims and are considered infidels by the Sunni Muslim Taliban. Recently, close to 100 Hazaras were allegedly massacred by the Taliban, not far from here. That forced people in Yaukolang to join Masood. People here, especially Hazaras, have suffered a lot of repression, and many have fled. Those of us who still remain are in a very dangerous position. On the other side of the mountains is the front line with opposition-controlled territory, and many men from here have been forcibly recruited to both armies. Today, few young men remain in Dahan Abasid, and stern criticism is levelled at the lack of international efforts to stop the war. The role of the UN has been limited to a few resolutions throughout these 20 years of fighting. The fighting will probably erupt again, and it's in the hands of God what will happen to us. The men in the village gather in the mosque for prayers, which also means time to drink some tea and counsel each other about other matters arising in the area. If the drought continues and the aid organisations don't act fast enough, people will be forced to leave this area because they can't feed their families. Everyone should overcome their differences, and we Muslims have a duty to make our position clear to the other nations in the world. After the service, we're invited to a traditional meal, the first after the Muslim month of fasting. The men eat first. The village has quite often served meat in recent years. The drought has meant that most animals have had to either be sold or slaughtered, and our host, Mohammed Dad, only has one calf left now. We couldn't get enough food for everyone. They're only gone because of the shortage of food. My father and 4 brothers have gone with their families to Pakistan just because of the water shortage, but I'm still here. They're working as labourers there, as many people do now. Torkham, the border post on the Pakistani side, has been closed to Afghans since the end of last year. Yet up to 200,000 have crossed the mountainous border by foot to seek refuge since then. Most have ended up here, in the transit camp Jalazai. 80,000 Afghans escaped drought, hunger and fighting, only to find themselves in miserable circumstances in the camp, living in simple plastic tents. Pakistan still harbours up to 3 million Afghans, the world's largest refugee problem. But UN support has been cut back to barely nothing compared to during the Soviet war. Pakistan is no longer able to provide for even the basic upkeep of the refugees, and hence refuses to let them be registered. So those who could help have no access to the camp. The situation is desperate. Most of the people have been here for months without any support, except for simple plastic sheets. In the day, the heat kills us, and at night the cold. We have no shelter and no proper drinking water. We lack medical care and medicine, and we don't have proper toilets. Every day, diseases like measles cause children to die. Stomach diseases are common, and private handouts of food have caused riots. The situation is that desperate. This is how much rice we've had. Apart from this, I've received nothing. The Afghan refugees are close to the bottom of this society, and apart from being a heavy burden for Pakistan, they've been the first to feel the impact of a local recession. Given the lack of international support, many are forced into drug peddling, prostitution and crime just to survive. One of the more profitable activities is smuggling, and everything is sold at Karkano market outside Peshawar. It's all been carried over the border. It's made in Malaysia and transported to Afghanistan and then back to Pakistan. TVs, air conditioners, fridges, everything comes from Afghanistan into Pakistan. Weapons are also smuggled in large quantities into Pakistan, contributing to the growing instability. They are sold openly here in the area bordering Afghanistan. In this northwestern frontier province, Pakistan has no authority. This is a tribal area, and the different tribes here control the smuggling. By camel, donkey, and finally truck, the goods are transported along mountainous routes, which are difficult to monitor. Inside Afghanistan, the fields are green, but this year the crop has changed. It used to be most profitable for farmers here to cultivate poppy. Poppy. We used to plant poppy on all this land last year. Even though Islam strictly prohibits all drug use, last year Afghanistan accounted for 80% of world production of raw opium, which is used to produce heroin. Now, just wheat is grown here. In July last year, the Taliban unilaterally banned all poppy cultivation in the areas under their control, and everything indicates that the ban has been strictly observed by farmers. They cannot plant poppy, and if they do, they will be punished. The Taliban were very tough with those who planted poppy, and even killed 4 or 5 of them. The deeply religious and traditional Taliban movement came onto the scene around 1994. Their aim was to bring about an Islamic revolution and to enforce their own interpretation of Sharia, or Islamic law. They now control 90% of the country, including the capital, Kabul. But the Taliban regime has not yet been internationally recognized due to their alleged backing of terrorism, human rights abuses, and their gender policy. The Taliban have, amongst other things, forbidden women to go outside without being totally covered, and they're not allowed to work except in female hospitals. Dr. Nafisa left Kabul for opposition territory in the north a year ago. The living conditions in Kabul were too hard for me, So we left and came here. Afghanistan is a deeply traditional country, and even in opposition-controlled territory, few women walk outside without what they consider proper dress. Male and female roles are strictly separate. The ongoing war and the lack of development has also made it more difficult for women to work outside the home. There are limitations for women. Few families permit their women to work outside the home. But anyway, there's not enough work for women in this area. There's just one school and one hospital where women can work. There are no other places offering work for us. When the Taliban entered Kabul, they turned the clock there back centuries, for the emancipated woman as well as for everyone else. Filming of living objects is forbidden and has to be done covertly. The Taliban regime is now under UN sanctions for their harbouring of the alleged terrorist Osama bin Laden. The ongoing destruction of Afghan cultural heritage and the Buddha statues in Bamiyan has increased their isolation.
People in the West, they are so negative to the Taliban that anything which is bad for the Taliban, that's good. But one has to ask the question, what will happen if the Taliban implode, if the Taliban collapses? The answer to that is most presumably that it will be complete and total chaos in Afghanistan.
Anders Fenger is the director of the Swedish Committee for Afghanistan, which has more than 20 years' experience working in the country. He sees little prospect of a swift end to the war.
The fighting will continue, and of course this is not making it easier for us who are working with saving lives and working for the development of the country and so on. Neither of the fighting factions in Afghanistan makes any priorities for humanitarian needs. So their priority is the war, for both of them.
Everything here is worn out or destroyed. Roads, electricity, water systems. But the civil war has not been sustainable without support from the surrounding countries. Each of them supports their faction, and Pakistan is claimed to be the main supporter of the Taliban. Pakistan's state oil is now selling gasoline along the main route to Kabul. The old civilian structure is gone, and a new one has arisen centering around the war, where local commanders press gang people into paying taxes and sending their sons to join their forces. But others go by choice. I came voluntarily from my village. The salary for a soldier is $10 a month. No other jobs are available. The war goes on because many make money out of it, among them arms traders. The opposition forces receive ammunition from former Soviet Union countries, but its origin is not Russian. From the heights in Dashti Kala in northern Afghanistan, there's a good view over Amudara River and Tajikistan on the other side. This is the supply route to the opposition. Not far away to the south are situated the Taliban positions. A few rounds are fired, just to show their willingness to do battle is still there. We enlisted in the Northern Alliance to defend our country and our homes. The opposition alliance face hardships to continue fighting. In recent years, the Taliban have advanced far north, and few give the opposition, divided into several ethnic factions, more than 5 years before they have to surrender. The opposition wants peace negotiations, But the Taliban's outspoken goal is to take military control of the whole country. But the men here, refugees themselves, are not going to give in easily. We will make jihad against the Taliban. We will kill them. We will not allow them to come into our land. The Taliban begins to shell the village below, and people seek shelter. Almost every day the village is shelled. One shell landed over there, one there, and another one near this wall. Everyone expects a major Taliban offensive in the summer, and people are worried. They shell everywhere, military bases as well as the village. This is what awaits the wounded. The operation theatre at the clinic in the neighbouring village of Hodja.
It's only a simple table. It's not suitable for operations, but we have to do on this table because we have nothing else. And there are our emergency drugs. And
the drugs are produced in Russia, but the coffins in the backyard awaiting the dead are made here. Inside the clinic there are wounded soldiers. When I get better, I will go back and fight against Pakistani people. His neighbour, a Taliban soldier, hit a mine during an attack and wounded his leg. Among the men in his force were many Pakistanis. The Taliban army is said to consist of up to 40% Pakistanis. Among them are people from Kandahar and Punjab. I don't know their language, they're speaking in other languages. There were everything. Were there any Arabs? No Arabs, but Punjabis. I know because I can speak Urdu.
yeah. Most of the doctors and other workers left the country because of the fightings, and we have to help our people. If you want to know about our salary, we have been paid twice since last 2.5 years, and it's about $10–15 per month.
Hodja, often haunted by dust storms, is one of the main junctions for the opposition. Helicopters carry ammunition and supplies to the front in central Afghanistan and return with the wounded. Everything is paid for with what the farmers can produce, and the war is funded by controlling the trade. But in the midst of this despair, people get married, and of course there are celebrations, but for men and women separately. Afghanistan is not completely forgotten by the world. The UN World Food Programme gives food in exchange for work, like repairing roads. And international efforts have staved off the expected hunger crisis this winter. Hence, many have been able to stay here, even though the situation is close to desperate. And thanks to drought and war, food is too expensive for most. The rich people can buy food, but the poor people, the refugees who are living in tents or somewhere else, they can't afford it. They have to sell the goods from their homes. Outside Hodja, the need is apparent. The camp is full of displaced from the front line, but almost as many come from this area. They sit waiting in simple tents all day, in the hope of access to deliveries from aid organisations. Deserted, destroyed houses and refugees. The war and all associated crimes have created rifts in this society and a desire for revenge which could feed itself for generations. And serious international efforts towards peacemaking are yet nowhere to be seen.
If they are putting up enough pressure to stop the foreign support for the regime and for the opposition, then there would be a better possibility for a negotiated peace and for an end to the war.
We got away from them. Then they set my house and everything on fire, and we are homeless. Yes, we will fight the Taliban. We will destroy them and retake our land.